We're on Facebook and Twitter with our post show, continuing our discussion with college presidents of color. I want to give the rest of you a chance to answer the question I asked Dr. Pelton. So I'll start with you, Dr. Wooden.
So this notion that a person of color or a Black leader has to be 10 times as better, and I think each of us realize that, and each of us were probably raised, one, to say too much whom is given, much is expected. And so when I wake up every day, I think about how I can serve the world in a unique position. Dr. Pelton talked about what his college is doing. At Simmons, my mission is to look at the intersectionality of women and people of color and how we alleviate those inequities. We know that women, especially women of color, make like 60% on the dollar compared to their white male counterparts. So what can I do better in my role as Simmons to close that inequity disparity? How can we educate women? How can we ensure high school women have the confidence to pursue careers are so important to me and have leadership roles? How do we encourage people to go to graduate school? How do we ensure that they really break the change of the C-suites and nonprofits and government agencies and corporations? The other thing that you said, Dr. Pelton, my training is in academia business. I'm a business school professor. And that's one of the first things I've been asking when I got to Simmons. Our vendors and our procurements. Where are we spending our dollars? Why do they not look diverse? And so this is something important to me, too. We have to think about wage gaps. We have to think about the economy. And we also have to think about the health disparities we see. And so, yes, as leaders, we have to be 10 times better as leaders of colors. And I think all of us just carry that service ethos as lifting as we climb.
Dr. Pender?
At Massart, actually, our design majors are our most diverse majors. So we have overall 30% students of color. And in our design majors, for some of them, like communication design, that goes up to over 40%. And I think that is very indicative of how Massart is serving the Commonwealth and enabling students of color, artists of color to get an affordable education to then go back, as we know, because we're a state university, that most of our students stay in the state and have jobs in the state. And we just received a Lumina grant to help us close some of the graduation gaps between Black and brown students and our white students. And one of the main things that we're doing with that is training faculty. And that's where we get into how do we do retention, right? To make sure that students of color graduate. And it's not just making sure they have enough funding, but it's also to make sure that the curriculum that they're getting and the instructors that are mentoring them also have the training that keeps them engaged, that makes them feel welcome in a predominantly white environment. And so we're really excited about how our Justice, Equity, and Transformation Office started these Thriving Classroom workshops last year. And they were focused on that type of strategies for retention. And the Lumina grant is enabling us to make sure all of our faculty get that training. So those are some of the things that we have been focusing on before. And that's, again, not recent events, right? Mm-hmm. Most of our schools were working towards these issues a long time ago.
Dr. Roberson?
Again, I'm like my colleagues that this is the work that I chose because it is my ability to give back. And some of the things that we do at RCC is we, as a 2-year school, often we are thought about as the preparation for transfer, and many of our students do. But as an institution serving Black students and students of color, we know that we can't afford to just focus on transfer, that they may have economic needs where they have a need to have immediate employment. And so all of our degrees are designed to enable a student to go into the workforce or to transfer and to be able to make that choice. We make sure that the pathways are going to be as easy as possible. We don't offer courses that don't transfer. And we also spend extra time outside of the classroom helping students to be job ready, making those connections between our college and employers. We have employers that come on campus that establish those relationships with students so that they can find jobs. And so a lot of the work that we do, again, is embedded to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity towards success. It's nothing more important than increasing wealth and helping students to understand what they have to do to keep that wealth.
Dr. Pelton, referring to your letter once again, it was a great deal of poignancy in the part where you said you thought it was a movement, this past racial reckoning or the beginnings of it in the summertime, but now you recognize that it is a moment, and that was a little disheartening.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, is it a movement or a moment or a movement? And probably 2 months ago I said it's a movement. And now, I know, the jury's still out on that. I do think that one thing that will come out of this is this is really a leadership training program for future Black and brown leaders going forward. And I'm very pleased with that. But I want to go back to something very important that Dr. Wooden talked about, and that's the intersectionality of this. The radical king, the king that we never talk about on his birthday, said that the triple pandemic was race, poverty, and the war in Vietnam. And this is the Dr. King who wanted to advocate for a guaranteed income for all Americans. And the great Reverend William Barber, in a speech that he gave, I think 2 or 3 years ago, to talk about the legacy of MLK, he said, if you're poor, and it makes no difference if you're Black, you're brown, you're red, but when you can't pay your light bill, we're all Black. And that's intersectionality right there. And I'm glad that we lifted that up, because that's an important part of this conversation. It should be an important part of the national conversation as we move forward.
Dr. Roberson, movement or moment, were you expecting it not to be a movement?
I think so. I mean, the lived experience is that we've had these other moments in time where some of our issues have come to the forefront, and then we see them die and fade to the background. And I'm hopeful, though, that this is indeed a real change, in that, you saw protests all over the world. That was the first time that I've ever seen that. You saw people from every race represented, and you still see people of every race being involved and calling for justice. I think that's the thing that encourages me to believe that indeed this might be a movement.
Dr. Wooden?
I'm optimistic. I'm going to say this is a movement. It's a movement because it's global, like Dr. Roberson said, but it's also our next generation. They're not going to let it cease. Look what they're doing on social media. Look how they're out in the streets. And our colleague, I believe the world is starting to get it. So I want to be optimistic. They're starting to feel our pain. They're starting to see the racism, and they want to do better. So I'm calling it a movement.
Okay. Dr. Pender.
I'd like to say it's a movement, too. And I think for me, a lot of that optimism is informed by spending so much time during this incredible time with my young adult children. And actually, I have a 15-year-old too. And to see how incredibly engaged the social media is, and how it's engaged so many young people. That was a type of media power that was not available in the 60s, in the 70s, right? And that, I think, of course, it's used in other ways, as we know, as we go into the election. But just to see how much young people feel that is a powerful tool that they are activating and using to communicate to each other. And like my 15-year-old is, during the, June was actively engaged in arguments and debates, posting articles, talking about militarized police violence and all of this stuff on her phone. That's what gives me the optimism that it's a movement.
In the quiet moments that you all have, if you get a chance to have the quiet moments, I wonder how you feel the responsibility to be in leadership in this moment, but not just in any leadership role, in the role where you are actually shaping, in many ways, the future leaders of the country, whether it be the adult students at Valerie Roberson's Roxbury Community College, the artists at Mass College of Art, the young women at Simmons, the communication experts at Emerson. I mean, these are all major arenas which could have long-lasting impact long after you all have moved from those positions. But how do you feel in this moment with that responsibility? Dr. Wooden.
Boy, I think about that every day. And Kelly, you know, Simmons has a heritage of doing that. When you look at Gwen Eichler, Ann Fudge, your board, and it is something that I carry on my shoulders. And every day I say my life work is to help the next generation of leaders prepare for their life work. And what I mean by life work is not only a successful professional career, but it means that they go out and make their community a better place, that they are civically engaged. And for me, it's just such an honor that I have that to do that. So it's important to me. And every day I'm thinking about it, how I level playing fields, how I open doors, and how I prepare those next generation of leaders like Gwen and Ann.
Dr. Pender?
I agree with all of that. And being at a public school, there's even more of I feel a really intense responsibility because we have, you know, as Dr. Roberson does as well, students who may not have ever thought of going to school. And so we're capturing an important group that can have such an impact, incredible impact on their family and their communities because of the opportunities that are being offered to them. So that's one thing that's drawn me to public institutions is that incredible transformational potential of a public degree.
Dr. Roberson.
You know, I feel incredibly grateful and blessed to be in this position in this time. I too have thought about, you know, other places that I've worked in my career. I've been, you know, in situations where I was the only Black person in an institution of in a leadership position. And it indeed is just a pleasure to be able to actually do work that is going to make a difference in people's lives and enable them to change the world. And so I'm grateful every day, and I'm looking at every opportunity that I can to make these connections for students.
Dr. Pelton.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm really grateful to be in company with these great leaders, and I'm very optimistic about that. But you know, I'm the old guy here. I'm in my 23rd year of being a college president, but I've tried to use my presidency as a platform, especially for young Black and brown folks. And so at my previous institution, I created an academy that provided access to starting in the 8th grade and to young folks, Black and brown folks, who had never even thought about college. And now that program sends people off to Harvard, Stanford, and some other great places in the country. Created the Elma Lewis Center for Civic Engagement, which is now part of our Social Justice Center. And that program has reached deep into Black and brown communities with leadership programs and programs for high school students and so on. So it's for me, it's part and parcel of what I do. And I'm very privileged to be in the role that I'm in and to have the resources and the platform that I have to help lift up communities wherever I can.
Whenever I have discussions with educational leaders, I'm reminded of a sign posted in a segregated school, the Moton School in Prince George's County, which was set up because that's the only place that Black kids could go. And the sign says, "The road to freedom is education." So I thank you all for taking us all on the road. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.